sometimes for shortcomings, trying to make my way, knocking on every door in this maze. The times it's all out of reach.
Hello everyone. I'm here to share my Les Misérables project with you. I have journals and ephemera and digis and all kinds of good stuff. I don't speak French. It was written in French, so my pronunciation is terrible. So pardon my French. Need to get that out of the way. I think the easiest way to take you through this is to kind of do a crash course in the story as I show you my ephemera. So, Les Misérables. Les Mis was published in 1862. It was written by Victor Hugo, and he was French. He left France in about 1851 when the president declared himself emperor and did away with the republic. And he left the country and wrote the rest of the book. And it was a big one. Les Mis ended up being, let me zoom you out here, if I can, out. Zoom you out. A little more, there we go. Les Mis ended up being almost 1,500 pages. This is a paperback. And I'm sure all of you have read this through several times. But just in case you want to brush up on your details, I've got some visual aids. Les Mis was written in 5 volumes. What I've done here is I've taken an old book cover that was in the public domain, and this says Volume 1 Fontaine, and I've taken the logo and printed it on. So I have manipulated that as an image and then sewed around it onto cardstock and just made little tea-dyed mini books. And I have one for Volume 1, Volume 2, Cosette, Volume 3, Marius, Volume 4, Saint Denis is probably how it's pronounced. It looks like Dennis to us Americans. That's actually a street in Paris. And Jean Valjean is the 5th. So I have made 5 volumes to go in each of the 7 Les Mis journals, of which you'll be seeing 6. Because the 7th is a little different and it's not finished, and I'll present that at another time. But these are the mini books that go in each. Usually, when I make a series of journals, I rearrange the order that the pages and such and the images are presented in. I did a little bit different this time. The first page of all of the journals are the same, and I want to read you what this says. The book the reader now has before his eyes, from one end to the other, in its whole, and in its details, whatever the omissions, the exceptions, or the faults, is the march from evil to good, from injustice to justice, from the false to the true, from the night to the day, from appetite to conscience, from rottenness to life, from brutality to duty, from hell to heaven, from nothingness to God, starting point, matter, goal, the soul. Hydra at the beginning, angel at the end. And that is by Victor Hugo at the beginning of Les Misérables. The hero of our story is Jean Valjean. He was a prisoner who was sent to prison for stealing food, and he was sentenced to 5 years, and he served 20 after repeated escape attempts. And when he was released, he was set on his way, and he was ordered to carry with him a yellow convict passport, which he had to present anywhere he went. And because of that, everyone knew that he was a criminal, and nobody would feed him or give him shelter or give him work. And he was hungry. And Frustrated and down the road a ways, he ends up at the home of a bishop. And the bishop and his servant sit and eat dinner with him. And during the night, Jean Valjean robs them. He makes off with the silverware and some of their goods, and Jean Valjean is caught the next day. And when the police bring Jean Valjean back to the bishop, he says, "Oh, my good sir, you forgot the candlesticks," and tells the police it was a big mistake and forces even more loot upon Jean Valjean. And the bishop looks him in the eye and says, "With this I have purchased your soul. You will now do good with your life. You will go forward and do right by everything." And that is what Jean Valjean does. And the story then fast forwards to 5 or 6 years down the road. I love this image. This is a painting by Gauguin, who was a very good friend of Van Gogh's. And Gauguin painted this self-portrait of himself as Jean Valjean for Van Gogh, and I have included that along with the little description of the background of this picture. So Jean Valjean down the road has become a wealthy man. He is the mayor of a town, and he owns a factory, and it's a fairly good existence. He is an honest man, and he has a factory that is run with women working in it, and one of the women is fired from his factory by the lady who oversees the workers, because it's found out that she has had a child out of wedlock. And the woman who is fired is Fantine. Fantine has had a child, Cosette, and sent her away to live in the country with a family, and is working so that she can send money for her. And as she is fired, she turns to prostitution and other means. She sells her hair first and all of what little belongings she has, and finally ends up doing whatever she has to do to get money to send for her daughter's upkeep. And at that point, she is caught by the local police. Now, the new inspector in town is Inspector Javert, who is merciless. He's a good guy because he believes in the law, but he's a bad man. And Fantine pleads with him when she is arrested, and he's just merciless. He believes in the law and nothing else, even if he has to go to extremes to enforce the law. And as mayor of the town, Jean Valjean can overrule Inspector Javert. And when he hears Fantine's story, he takes pity on her and rescues her. About the same time, Javert realizes he recognizes Jean Valjean, and it turns out Javert was a prison guard and thinks that this is Jean Valjean, the convict, who is obviously not carrying his yellow document and going by a false identity. And Javert sets out to prove Jean Valjean is not who he says. So over the course of several things, without getting into too much detail, it is a very thick book. Fantine ends up dying of a terrible disease. Javert is chasing Jean Valjean. Fantine evokes a promise from Jean Valjean to go scoop up her daughter Cosette and rescue her and take care of her after she dies. And having to go on the lam because his identity has been discovered, Jean Valjean goes and he collects Cosette. He finds her acting as a servant rather than being cared for by the family, the Thénardiers, that she was left with. And that is where the classic image of Cosette sweeping comes from. And of course, this is the image that so many of us know from the plays and the movies and the books. This was an original illustration for the book in the beginning, and that is the iconic picture of Cosette that we know. So Jean Valjean scoops up Cosette, and he flees with her, and he ends up going to Paris, where he takes Cosette and hides in the convent there, and that's where Cosette grows up with a wholesome, safe life, and her papa, Jean Valjean, becomes the gardener at the convent, and that is where they spend the next, I think it's 9 or 10 years, and Cosette becomes a young lady. So fast forward, Cosette is a young lady. She becomes acquainted with and falls in love with Marius, who is a young revolutionary. He's well educated, and the story tumbles towards something that happened in history. A lot of people think the story, Les Mis, was based around the French Revolution. That was actually in 1790, I believe. The story in Les Mis is about a rebellion that happened in 1832. It's called the June Rebellion, and for several days there was an uprising against the government, people who were not satisfied with actually a rebellion that had happened a few years ago in 1830, and this was a continuation of that, and Marius was caught up in this. So there is politics and intrigue, and Jean Valjean ends up going to rescue Marius during this uprising, which did not end well for anybody. And during that, we also meet Gavroche and his 2 younger brothers, who were put out on the street. They were orphans, and they are caught up in the street scene and what happens in the rebellion. And so these are the stories that are told in Les Mis, and there are some really sad endings and happy endings, but I've got a lot of them in digis and on journaling cards, and let's go look at the journals. Okay, I am back with the journal flip here, and I wanted to talk for just a moment about Cosette, this iconic picture of Cosette. When I started making these journal covers, I was trying to decide what to put on the covers. I always make the cover of each journal different, and I also always try to apply the litmus test of what would I want if it was my journal. And I'm sure that everybody wants this picture on the cover of theirs. It's the symbol of the play, the books, and the movies. So she is in some way worked into the cover of all of the journals. I also just wanted to give you a peek in here. My daughter had asked me if I could make a small planner for her similar to my wallet planner, and just make a page for her to put in her planner from each theme that I do. So this is a stone gray pocket Filofax. Pocket is the size, and the dashboard inside is the Cosette picture. The buttons and lace and little tuck spots, and there's a little medallion that says peace, and I just stitched some sari. And the other picture of Cosette here with the pocket, and I put some of my business cards in there in case anyone was wondering. And the rest is the 2019 Filofax planner set that comes with this. And the neat thing about these pocket, this is the Filofax Malden. It has that billfold in the top, so that's really neat. I have a similar one in a different color that I use for a wallet. So anyways, that is the Cosette in the Filofax. I thought you might get a kick out of seeing that. And also, when I was putting these together, I had made like a bohemian style paperclip embellishment with some silk and beaded sequined silk, and this is some of the lyric sari silk. And I had showed this, I think, on my Instagram and such. Well, I had all of the Les Mis stuff out, so I went ahead and I did make a paperclip embellishment for each of the people getting a journal. So I will, they're all just a little bit different. They have the lyric sari silk attaching it sewed onto the paperclip, and the buttons with the Cosette picture, and a little pocket there, and I put a tea-dyed ticket in each because Les Mis is a show, and I thought that would be fun. This little bit of red pretty sequined trim came from Suchi, my friend in India, and the pieces at the bottom, the blue shiny beaded and rhinestoned silk, came from Sheila at Boho Daydreams. So I did make a whole stack of these, which is one of the reasons it took another day. A lot of these charms are the sunshine. There's a great quote on the sun and the moon, which I will read when I get to that in there. So each one is a little bit different, but I'll put one of these in with each of the journals that are sent out. So here we go. This one is called the Barricade because it has this guy at the top of the barricade, much like we all pictured Marius and his band in the story, although that did not end well. So I'm going to flip through this one in just a moment. This one I'm calling Fontaine, only because Fontaine and Jean Valjean are in this classic picture with the title and the kind of the signature plate. Each of the journals has a detachable, mostly sari silk lace. There's a little off-white eyelash trim, the stuff that I saved off the clothesline, if you were following me with that disaster in the wind. And there's a little charm that I made. It's actually a bead with the red and blue for the French colors, and those are detachable with a bulldog clip. And the canvas is printed with French words, French print, and really cool. Also, half of these had a vanilla sari silk tie on them, and I thought the red was so pretty I actually switched them out and made them all red. And this one is just Cosette. There's a Les Mis title page in back of that. And and the muslin tabs in the top, the second, third, and fourth signature, I did like a burgundy red and a vanilla and a blue here for the colors of the French flag. So it's kind of neat when you look at it from the top. So that's Cosette. This one is Jean Valjean. They all look a little different. They were different patches of this enormous canvas piece that I have with the writing on it, with the French writing. This is Victor Hugo. Victor Hugo, of course, was the author. And I've got a title page on here. And the sixth one is Javert, who of course was the inspector that pursued Jean Valjean all through the story. And I've worked the sari onto all the fronts there and kind of tried to keep consistent with a vintagey French flag color there. So let me grab the Barricade. The Barricade is Christine Riley's journal. She has been a huge inspiration and was the one behind this whole Les Mis project coming together now. And I wanted to give a special thank you to her so much. She's been my show and tell buddy throughout the whole project, and we've had a lot of fun while I put this together. And she's doing some wonderful work herself these days, whipping out some Van Goghs. So just wanted to say a special thank you to Christine. So this is the Barricade. I'm going to take off this tassel just so we can get it to lay flat while we flip through. They all lay quite flat when they're opened up. So on the insides of the cover, I've used Tim Holtz French Industrial, I believe was the paper collection. And I've got a picture of Cosette. There's two different groups of illustrations both from the 1800s of Les Mis, and I've got a smattering of both of them throughout the book. And as I read to you, passage from Victor Hugo. And the quotes are all passages from the book. It really was hard to pick and choose. I've got some Tim Holtz music fabric for the tabs in each. I didn't try to focus heavy on the musical aspect of Les Mis for this, but I did put a little bit here and there because so many of us enjoyed the musical so much. There is a red wire-wrapped stone in each of these. And this is from a copy of Les Mis that Christine actually sent to me. And I have taken the pages. The height was perfect. And just taken select pages and stitched them right onto the tea-dyed page. So you've got a whole page or two of reading. And I did that in each signature of each of these journals. I love this material, and it reminded me of the kind of distressed, aged French flag colors. So I've got a couple of fabric pockets with this material in each of the journals as well. Just a little classic Cosette picture. Fantine. Here is the first little tea-dyed booklet, little muslin at the top and down the binding of these. Some of the stenciling is of the fleur-de-lis, which has that French feel to it. And then in each signature there is a couple of pages that are hinged in the middle and sewed in from Les Mis, and this is a different size. This is from a paper bag. So there's actually pages from different Les Mis books throughout. I have had so much fun with watercolors, and these are tea-dyed index cards, like the ones that I like to use frequently. I actually have done a video on how I used the watercolors for these, and I'll have that posted in the next few days, so I'm not even going to spend any time gabbing about it now, but this is how it came out. And of course I did the red and the blue and left a off-white splotch in the middle so it could kind of emulate the French flag. The dangles in the middle of each signature are the banner paper punch, and what I did was I took white cardstock and I Mod Podged pages from Les Mis, and then I took red, white, and blue crayons and I colored the page lightly, and it left a waxy kind of feel, and then I punched them out. So it's the paper on the cardstock that's colored, and then the back is just another printed piece of cardstock to back it that came out of a small paper collection. So in each signature there's a dangle with banners and text from the from Les Mis as well. Larger fleur-de-lis. And a little passage from the Broadway play, Do You Hear the People Sing? It's the only musical part from the play that I put in. The rest of the quotes are all from the book. Picture of the 5 volumes, very old volumes of Les Mis. Jean Valjean when he was stealing the bishop's goods and making off into the night. There's a little charm musical notes on it. And a little Tim Holtz, I think that's from his Dapper paper collection, but this is his fabric collection. On the tab, I love that. And Javert. Here's one of the cards that are in the journal card Les Mis digital download collection. I took the cards that I had sewed on for that collection and divided them up between the journals. So you'll find different ones of those throughout. And some great quotes. I love that. To love another person is to see the face of God. And I've made another bead, a little bit smaller than the one on the tassel, with the flower and the red and blue beads. The Thénardiers. These are the people who Fontaine left Cosette with, and in the play they are quite comically bad people, but in the book they are just pure evil, and several different depictions of them throughout. Gavroche, the orphan, who is in the book, in the last part of the book at the Barricade, and while the uprising is going on in Paris, he is an orphan, and he is one of the children that they had turned out of their own children onto the street. It's a really dark family. I love this. This is one of the advertisements for one of the first productions of Les Misérables in the 1800s. And if you see the little picture of Cosette there in a number of places throughout the journals, I have taken that image and made it black and white and changed it around a bit and blown it up, and that's the origin of that version of Cosette with her mop and her bucket there. A great illustration of Cosette and Jean Valjean in the park, where Marius and she notice each other. And some great quotes. I've included little flashcards of names in some places. Just a little tea-dyed tag. Some more Tim Holtz. Love the blue. It kind of makes the edges of the page pop. This is Jean Valjean after he becomes mayor of the town. Is quite respectable. Here's another index card. I used some of the watercolors. This is a gang of people that the Thénardiers hired or enticed into going after Jean Valjean, who took Cosette from them. Fontaine pleading with Javert. Love that quote. There are no weeds and no worthless men. There are only bad farmers. It's a rather kind sentiment. I printed this on as a digistamp from the book. Tramp just walked in. He is crunching his food. This is the bishop, the candlesticks that he gave Jean Valjean. And this is actually a decoupaged tea-dyed index card with part of a page from the book that Christine sent me. And I've done some experimenting. Again, that'll be in the video that I upload in the next day or so. Had a lot of fun experimenting. This is just some vintage colored floral ribbon, and I love the colors. I thought it went really well. And here's another decoupaged index card, tea-dyed. It's got the red and the blue. One of the book pages. The death of Jean Valjean. That's Cosette and Marius there. I put a key charm because he starts out, Jean Valjean starts out in in prison in a labor camp, and his quest to become free. The key just seemed like an appropriate symbol. Again, here's the image of the self-portrait of Gauguin as Jean Valjean. Here's another one of the journal cards, the dinner with the bishop before he stole their silverware. And more quotes and flashcards. Put a charm in here with a rather ornate crucifix. The cross, when Jean Valjean rescued Cosette and adopted her, and they fled because Javert was chasing them, they hid in the convent for, I think it was 9 or 10 years, where Cosette grew up, and Jean Valjean was the gardener, so I included that there to represent their time in the convent. Another tea-dyed watercolored card. Another Barricade image like the one on the cover, and the logo throughout. I've used that on several pages. Hello, Tramp. I'm making a video. Can you wait? This is Marius and Eponine. Eponine was in love with Marius. Of course, he fell in love with Cosette. And in the story, Eponine ends up dying at the Barricade during the revolution at the end. And we find out that Eponine is also one of the Thénardier's children. So she knew Cosette as a very young lady. Love this illustration of Jean Valjean making off with Cosette and Thénardier chasing him to shake him down to see if he can get some more money or work him to his advantage. And of course, Jean Valjean has Cosette's mother's permission to rescue her and take care of her. It's just really, really well illustrated. Another great quote. Let us study things that are no more. It is necessary to understand them, if only to avoid them. Here's another version of the yes, Tramp, of Jean Valjean going to collect Cosette. Another version of illustrations. I think it's about 20 years later that those different illustrations appeared in the books, but still in the 1800s was. And this illustration of Javert's end, Inspector Javert, who pursued Jean Valjean all through the story, at the end decides that it's wrong to let him go because Javert is all about justice and the law, and it is wrong to take him back into custody, Jean Valjean, because he is a good man, and he sees that he's torn and that he has been wrong about things and so many more complicated implications of it, and he throws himself into the River Seine and commits suicide. It's a really dark book. It really is. You can probably tell that from the name if you aren't familiar with the story. or if you know the rather polished version of the musicals only. But there's Gavroche, the orphan who dies, and in the book, he ends up taking care of two smaller orphan boys, also children of the Thénardiers, and he doesn't even know that they're his brothers. Just heart-wrenching, beautiful, and dark story. Some more tea-dyed, watercolored index cards there. And this is just a teardrop-shaped crystal that had that bright blue French flag kind of feeling blue to it. Here's the title plate from the story with Jean Valjean and Fantine, Marius and Eponine. And this is one of the journal cards, Javert, and this is when Fantine was pleading with him to let her go when he had arrested her in the beginning. Victor Hugo, some watercolored illustrations, and this is the Convict Passport, the yellow Convict Passport that Jean Valjean was supposed to be carrying to identify him as a prisoner, as a thief rather, a convict. And some watercolor on this tea-dyed little tag. So that is the Barricade. And I've put actually put two pieces of sari through the top and bottom, or the front and back of each cover. And when tying it, if you keep the bows a little bit shorter and then just spread out the loops, it really fluffs up quite nicely. Well, I'm going to shed here. There we go. I find that the sari silk calms down after about a month of use, but until then I am constantly snipping and pulling out little dribs and drabs. So that is Les Mis. It was a huge project. I've got 3 or 4 more Les Mis theme projects going on that I'm not going to show you yet. For various reasons, but I will have videos and things out with that. I'm going to put 3 digis for Les Mis in my shop, 2 of images and a third one journal cards using those images that I've used throughout these journals. I'm also going to put my full junk journal course on sale for the next week, as well as the altered planner course. So those will be available if you're interested. I probably will not have any journals out in the immediate future. This month is planting month here on our homestead, and after I get all of these shipped, my attention is turning to the garden to get some planting in earnest done, and then I'm working on my next course. So I will be quite reachable though, and I will be finishing up other projects. I've got 2 swaps going on, and I have another. I guess I have 2 more product shares to do and reviews of things that some companies have sent me. So lots of good stuff in the works. Thanks so much for patiently awaiting this project to come out and sticking with me through the whole flip through and show and tell here if you're still with me. And I'll catch up with you guys soon. Have a great day. Thanks. Bye-bye.